And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 71. This is the Week 13 preview episode where the dreaded, hated, not respected Pittsburgh Steelers come into Paycor Stadium for the first matchup against our Cincinnati Bengals in what could be a make or break game for the Bengals this season. It seems like I've been saying that almost since the beginning of the season started. Must-win game for the Bengals. At 4-7, the Bengals need to pretty much win every game. Realistically, they don't have a great chance of making the playoffs, but that's not the only reason to play the game. I mean, people are acting like, oh, the season's over. The season's not over. Guess what? Win or lose, they're still going to play all 17 games on the schedule. They're not going to forfeit or cancel the rest of the games. I'm still going to watch no matter if they're in the playoffs or not. So playoffs, let's not really put that in the front of our minds. And as Joe Burrow said in one of his press conferences this week, playoffs aren't, the prospects aren't looking too great for worrying about the playoffs. All they can do right now is play their best, go out there and live up to their greatness, do everything they can do to win the game. And if by some miracle they happen to get into the playoffs, great. But that shouldn't really be the expectation at this point. I know that was the expectation, and expectations were high coming into the beginning of the season. But at this point, at 4-7, it's already, they've played 11 games, hasn't gone that well. We need to readjust our expectations. And that seems to be where Joe Burrow's mindset is at, for better or worse. From the fan perspective, the people who are delusional, eternal optimists might not want to hear that dose of reality, and they think, oh no, this is still our season. We're going to win the Super Bowl this year. We're going to, right, sure. That's what the Bengals, I'm sure, would like you to believe, and that's kind of what Zach Taylor has been continuing to preach. It's amazing how consistent the messaging is from Zach Taylor. It's like everything is all just part of the plan. This is December football. This is when we really need to play our best football because this is when it counts the most. It's like, dude, you can't just act like the first 11 games never happened and that now the games are the ones that really matter. Now we're going to actually start playing. It's like all of the games count the same. You lost more games than you won so far, and that matters. Can't just sweep it under the rug. Like Ted Karras was one of these podcasts, and they put up as the episode title, 6 games left to define our season. Because, they got 6 games left. But all 17 games define the season. It's not just 6 games defining the season. They all matter. They're all defining. But, it's going to be revisionist history. We already know the Bengals, media department, when they put out the story of the 2024 Bengals, the story is going to begin on week 4. They're going to don't even mention the first 3 weeks that they lost. Let's just skip all that. Forget about that part. Remember that one game where we won? That's when the season started, right? And then there's a couple of games we forgot in there, but we won some other ones, some other critical games. And then it's going to be a story about, building the culture for the future and getting stronger for next year or whatever. This season is pretty much a write-off. And the only thing that's frustrating about it is Zach Taylor's messaging is going to stay the same because he's not on the hot seat. He knows his job isn't in any jeopardy, so he can say and do whatever he wants. The Bengals aren't going to fire him. It doesn't really matter. People will talk about, oh no, what if the coach lost the locker room? What if the players don't believe in him anymore? It doesn't really matter because he's going to still be the coach. They can get new players, draft 10 more guys next year, like they drafted 10 guys this year. Get some new blood in there. They've never heard this same song and dance from this coach before. They're just happy to be on an NFL team. So who cares from Zach Taylor's perspective? As long as the fans keep showing up, as the only person Zach Taylor really needs to convince that he's doing a good job is Mike Brown, the owner. And if he can convince Mike Brown that he's the right guy for the job, he's not going to lose his job because Mike Brown is old and stuck in his ways, and he's, refuses to hire a president, refuses to hire a general manager or anyone who could actually competently run the franchise. He would rather do it all himself and to his credit or detriment, he's the one who's ultimately responsible for the product on the field, the product that the team is putting out every year. But like we said, Duke Tobin's been, the executive vice president of player personnel or senior vice president, whatever he is, the de facto general manager. He's been in the same job since 1999. Obviously, he's been there 25 years. He doesn't feel like he's in any jeopardy of losing his job, whether the team is good or bad or whatever. He's going to come back next year. So none of these people, the only people like Joe Burrow said, and one thing that is really insulting, a phrase you hear some of these writers and other people throw around a lot is, well, the team doesn't have anything to play for. They're saying, oh, they're eliminated, they're out of the playoffs, nothing to play for. Well, nothing could be further from the truth because as Joe Burrow pointed out, free agency is coming up after this season. Guys have to put out good film, good tape because their contracts might be expiring at the end of the year. They could become free agents. And so the tape that they have in week 1 or the tape that they have in week 17 doesn't really matter. Like if you're a guy who is on the back end of the roster and you go out, even if the team isn't going to be making the playoffs, if you go out and have an incredible performance, like let's say you're, Andre Yosivach or somebody like that, and you go out and have like 10 catches, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. It doesn't matter if it's a quote unquote meaningless game. Other teams around the league are going to say, hey, that guy can play. And if the chance ever comes around to sign him, we're going to take a look. So that's why the guys out there at the end of the day, we can try to delude ourselves as fans and think that they're really putting their bodies on the line for the Super Bowl. Maybe some of them are, but I think most of them are putting their bodies on the line for their families and to get paid, to get a paycheck. And they're going to do whatever they have to do to keep the paychecks coming in, but also if they can get a better paycheck somewhere else down the road, they're going to do that too. That's what these players are playing for. They're not they're not playing for nothing. They're definitely playing for something. I wouldn't call their family and their livelihood nothing. That's very important to players, to men who are professionals, who want to provide for their families. Maybe they're coming, you don't know what background somebody's coming from, what kind of pressure they could be under to provide for their family. So all this stuff is playing on these players' minds beyond just wins and losses, whether or not they're going to win the Super Bowl, win a title, be a champion. All that stuff is great. There's lots of millionaires who have played football in the NFL who were never a champion. But I would say in terms of, the life that they've been able to achieve, would they trade their millions of dollars for a Super Bowl? Probably not. So that's all these things are playing in players' minds. And the other thing is, there's still injuries. Even if you're eliminated from the playoffs, that doesn't protect your body from getting seriously injured. So you have to think about that. Do I want to go out there and risk my body, my health, my future health and what I can do outside of the game or within the game of football? These are all things that are issues for players in this team. But Zach Taylor, like I said, the messaging has been totally consistent with him. It's amazing when you listen to Zach Taylor and you listen to other coaches around the NFL. Some of the less good coaches, I would say, sound a lot like Zach Taylor. The good coaches, like one of the, Mike Tomlin, probably for the Steelers, the coach we're going to face this week, he's one of the coaches where if you listen to him in a press conference or an interview, you feel the confidence, the inspiration, the fire coming out of him, and you can see why the players in the locker room respect him, and you can understand why the Steelers have never had a losing record under Mike Tomlin. They had that one year where it was 8-8, and it had a tie, so technically it was 500, but never had a losing record under Mike Tomlin, and you just get a different vibe out of him. Whereas, for example, I'm recording this after the Thanksgiving games have already taken place, and one of the biggest stories coming out of the Thanksgiving games was that Lions-Bears disastrous end of the game for the Bears, where if you haven't heard about it, Freudian slip. The Bears were driving the last second. Bears are down by 3. They're driving into Lions territory. I think they had somewhere around the 30 or 35-yard line. And on second down, they were going to try to do a quarterback draw, but quarterback Caleb Williams got sacked lost yards, and so they had to call everybody back to the line of scrimmage. They were trying to run another play. The Bears had a timeout, and there's about 35 seconds left. This whole sequence is running down. The clock's ticking. Bears are in disarray. They don't know what play to run, whether they should call timeout, what to do. Finally, with 7 seconds left, Bears snap the ball. They throw up a prayer of a pass that's ended up being the last play of the game on third down, and the game ends with the Bears still having a timeout unused. Lost the game by 3. They didn't even try a field goal. Just total mismanagement of the clock. So, as bad as the Bengals have been this year in terms of losing close games, they haven't had anything quite that embarrassing from a coaching perspective. There's coaches' decisions, Zach Taylor's decisions, that you can argue maybe they shouldn't have gone for it on 4th and short a couple of those times where it didn't work. Maybe they should have kicked a field goal instead, or, just different decisions throughout. But there was nothing, when they went for those field goals, like against the Chargers with Evan McPherson when he missed, that wasn't a bad head coaching decision by Zach Taylor. It's like you expect the kicker to make the kick. He just missed it. Sometimes kickers miss. So it wasn't necessarily, bad clock management. But this is for the Bears. Obviously, the Bears coach got fired the next day. But after the game, he didn't have a great explanation for it. He didn't sound especially competent or confidence-inspiring. And he was just saying a lot of the same things that Zach Taylor says after a loss. It's just like, well, we just got to keep sticking with it. We're right there. We're just one play away, and we just got to keep sticking with it. And we'll, get that momentum going back in our favor. And because they lost 6 games in a row, the Bears. So obviously the momentum wasn't in the Bears' favor. Confidence was not behind the coach. They let him go. But it was just a reminder to me that a lot of these coaches say a lot of the same things. They probably get media trained. And so hopefully we don't have a similar performance by Zach Taylor after this game against the Steelers. But Bengals are 4-7 right now. If they lose another game, they're going to be 4-8. The Bears just fired their head coach. And guess what? The Bears record is also 4-8 right now. So that's the difference between these two scenarios. Is the Bears, they got into a situation where they lost 6 games in a row, and on national television on Thanksgiving, they lost confidence in the coach. They had to let him go. I don't think that's ever in the cards for Zach Taylor this season. Maybe after next season, if they continue to lose, then we could have a conversation about Zach Taylor, because as I've said, his Zach Taylor contract goes all the way through for another 2 seasons into 2026 and 27. So the Bengals, as Mike Brown has said, he's not happy or in favor of paying coaches to not work. So they're going to keep Zach Taylor around as long as he's under contract, which is probably going to be a little bit too long. But that's typically what the Bengals do. They hang on to people longer than they need to. But also, strangely, they get rid of some of their best players before they should have. It's hard to say. It's, hindsight's 2020. So a lot of people are looking around at players that the Bengals have let go and saying, well, gee, maybe that was the reason that the Bengals were more successful, was because it has these better players that they didn't replace, such as DJ Reader, nose tackle. The Bengals never really replaced a nose tackle. They moved BJ Hill from 3 technique to nose tackle, and he's not really a nose tackle. And then they have Sheldon Rankins, also not a nose tackle, who is also not going to play in this game. Sheldon Rankins is missing his 2nd consecutive game, and about his 5th or 6th game that he's missed this season. This time he's got some kind of a viral illness, as Zach Taylor called it. We don't know what kind of a virus it is. I don't want to speculate. But some kind of an illness. And I would assume that means he's not around the team, because if it's a viral type of thing, it's got to be contagious, you would assume, or just not something you want to bring into the facility that could maybe infect other players with that same viral illness. So he's going to be incommunicado, you would imagine, for a while. We're going to probably see more Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson, Jay Tufele up there at defensive tackle if Rankins continues to be out for a long term. But that was one of the things that the Bengals missed out on. They let Tyler Boyd go. Nobody ever talks about letting Tyler Boyd go because he was getting kind of long in the tooth, not really as productive as he had been. But still, Tyler Boyd is He's got a couple hundred yards in Tennessee. He hasn't really been doing great, so you're not really missing Tyler Boyd on offense, but they don't really have a great slot receiver option at the moment. Andre Iosivas hasn't really panned out to be a complete replacement in the offensive game, and they have actually kind of changed up the offense. They've gone to more of a 2 tight end set, not as many receivers on the field as much. They were usually in 11 personnel more than anybody in the NFL last year. They've gone to more 2 tight ends, but that was also when they had Eric All. He's out for the season with that ACL. They've still got Tanner Hudson, Mike Gesicki, Drew Sample. They signed up from the practice squad Cam Grandy, another undrafted rookie, and we haven't seen Tanner McLaughlin, 6th-round rookie, one game this entire season. I don't know if he's been active on game day at all, which is kind of a surprise because he was a 6th-round draft choice, and he's been on the active roster every game, but they just make him inactive. I don't know what's up with that, but I would hope he would get some playing time if he's not injured or something. Like, get him in there at least, unless he's just like so terrible in practice they don't even think he can play in the game at all. So I don't know what's up with that. That's kind of a disappointment. But other players that, they didn't sign to long-term contracts, like Jesse Bates, the big one on defense, that we have seen has been a complete failure in terms of replacing him last year with Dax Hill and Nick Scott. Again, they let Nick Scott go. People were in favor of that, and they moved Dax Hill to cornerback. Unfortunately, Dax was playing okay. He was playing better than you would expect for a guy who never played cornerback in the NFL. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL. I think it was that Eagles game. Tore his ACL. He's out for the rest of the season. And then the other safeties that they brought in to replace them, Geno Stone has been terrible. He had led the league in interceptions last season, and he's got 1 interception this season. And that interception came against the Browns, against Dorian Thompson-Robinson, not even Deshaun Watson. It was the backup, basically 3rd-string quarterback for the Browns, who was throwing up a pass the receiver wasn't even looking for. That was the only interception Geno Stone has managed to get this season. So not what we were expecting out of him. And he's getting paid, what is he getting paid, like 3 years, $16 million or something like that. So way too much money for what he's producing. So this may be a back-to-back free agent safety signing and then cutting the next year, because they did the same thing with Nick Scott. They sent Nick Scott to a 2-year contract, cut him after 1 year because he was terrible. Geno Stone, if he doesn't pick up and show him something, he may get released at the end of the season too. They got Von Bell at safety, bringing him back. And coincidentally, Von Bell, for his Bengals years, is most known for that hit on Juju Smith-Schuster on Monday Night Football on like Christmas or Christmas Eve. And it was that Ryan Finley game. They had a whole feature on YouTube. The Bengals media put out a whole feature about that Steelers game that the Bengals miraculously won. Another bit of revisionist history. They were talking about Ryan Finley like he was such an amazing quarterback, and they had like his 2 good plays from that game. I almost forgot about that. One hit, Ryan Finley got accordion crumpled up into like 5 different pieces. I'm surprised he got up. They were saying like Gio Bernard was saying, he was like, man, when you see somebody get hit like that, you're just wondering, are they going to get up? So the funny thing about that was, after that, I don't know if that was the last game Ryan Finley ever played, but that was definitely the last season Ryan Finley was on an NFL roster. Somehow after the season, the Bengals traded Ryan Finley away to the Houston Texans for a 6th-round pick, I think it was. And then he didn't even make it through training camp for the Texans. They cut him before the season even started. Ryan Finley never played again. But that was amazing game. I think that was the season where Joe Burrow hurt his knee. They won 4 games, and there was just that bright spot at the end of the year when all hope seemed like it was lost. That's what the Bengals want you to believe. They're like, oh, just when you think all hope is lost, don't give up. Keep coming to the game. You might see something amazing, and hopefully that's true. I hope the fans continue to come to these Bengals games, but it's starting to get cold out there, and if it were me, I don't know if I would want to spend 3+ hours standing out in the cold to watch the Bengals lose to the Steelers. But the weather has changed. This is going to be the first below freezing game the Bengals have played this season. And some players handle the cold better than others. Some have played in the cold before, like we saw Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for the Dolphins. That's the whole narrative about the Dolphins, is they can't play well in cold weather, and they went on Thanksgiving and played in Green Bay and lost, and they looked cold and ineffective compared to how they had been in previous weeks. So we're going to have to see which Bengals players are able to handle the cold and which Steelers players are able to handle the cold. We'll have to see who's, mentally got the toughness and all that kind of stuff. Some of these players from the South, like T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, I know they don't like the cold, but they've been effective at playing in it. I think the first time they played in the snow was in that Buffalo Bills playoff game. So we'll have to see. Guys like Amarius Mims, he's from the South. He's not used to being in cold weather. So we'll have to see how these guys react. And their bodies, this is week 13. They've played 11 games. The Bengals are coming off a bye week. So relatively speaking, they're going to be physically refreshed, feeling as good as they could at this point in the season. They're not going to feel quite as good as, before they played any games at all, before the season started. But, at this late stage of the season, everybody's dealing with little bumps, bruises, cuts. So just that extra time to get recuperated should hopefully help them in this game. But you never know, because it could work the opposite directions. Now, the Bengals are 3-0 coming off the bye week in their last 3 seasons. So hopefully that's a good sign. But sometimes, like if you get that long weekend, like, it's Thanksgiving, we got the holiday. Sometimes you get time off of work and you're like, that extra day or two off of work was pretty nice. I could actually go for that, like on a more regular basis. You get kind of out of your regular routine. You get into a more relaxed atmosphere and you start thinking, hey, this whole relax is pretty nice. Some people can't wait to get back to work, can't wait to get back to the grindstone. And so they miss that routine. And so that could be, annoying to have a break for some people, like Trey Hendrickson. I could see him being that type of a guy who was probably like, the first one in to work out as soon as they opened up the stadium. So we'll have to see what kind of shape these guys are in coming out of the bye. Hopefully it wasn't a situation where they just sat on the couch and got fat and lazy, didn't do any cardio exercise to stay in shape. We'll see. But something to watch for in this game is going to be, as always, the injury report. So let's check out real quick on the injury front. Bengals are relatively healthy. The only thing of concern is Orlando Brown Jr., left tackle. He was a limited participant Wednesday, Thursday of this week. Friday, he was a full participant. So it's looking, even though he's listed as questionable, Orlando Brown should be available in this game. And that's going to be a huge boost for the Bengals offense. Joe Burrow's been getting hit back there in the passing game, so that should help alleviate some pressure on Joe Burrow. Everybody else is looking good except for Charlie Jones. He was limited Wednesday, Thursday, did not practice Friday, so receiver Charlie Jones still dealing with that groin injury. He's doubtful for the game this Sunday, and so we're probably going to have to see Khalil Herbert and Trenton Irwin maybe returning kicks. Maybe we'll see Jermaine Burton returning kicks and punts. Sheldon Rankins, it's for some reason they list him as unspecified, but he should be out because he did not practice at all this week. I think he's still going to be out for the game with that illness. I wouldn't imagine he's going to play after not practicing at all during the week. And then one critical thing to keep an eye on for the Bengals, middle linebacker Logan Wilson has a knee injury. He did not practice at all this week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, no practice. He's listed as questionable for the game, not doubtful, questionable. But that would be a huge blow because Logan Wilson plays every snap on Bengals defense. He's the one getting everybody lined up. He's the green dot, the one who's got the speaker in his helmet to communicate the calls from the sidelines to his other defensive teammates, what they're going to do. And he's a valuable veteran for this team. He's one of the highest paid linebackers in the NFL. So losing him would be a big negative for the Bengals. Looking at the Steelers injury front, Corey Trice Jr., cornerback, he is out with a hamstring. Alex Highsmith, the defensive end or linebacker opposite TJ Watt. TJ Watt lines up on the defensive left. Alex Highsmith normally lines up on the defensive right, but he did not practice Wednesday. Then he was limited Thursday and Friday, and he's listed as doubtful for the game. So we'll have to see. Again, that will be a big impact if he's able to play. How much? How effective is he? He's coming off. He got his ankle, a sprained ankle. It was a few weeks ago, and so depending on how severe that sprain is, he may or may not be able to play. It's just going to maybe come down to how he's feeling on game day, how swollen it is, how much pain he's in, whether he decides to take like a pain-killing injection or something like that. We don't know. So that'll be something to watch. Other guys, Montrevious Adams, defensive tackle, he's out with a knee injury. Otherwise, they just had some guys who had rest days, but no injury reports. So Steelers looking relatively healthy. Bengals, a few question marks on their side. I mentioned this is going to be the first December game for the Bengals. It's going to be a cold game. Luckily, it's going to be at 1 o'clock. It's not a night game, at least. So if it was a night game, it would be like brutally cold and windy. It's going to be at 1 o'clock, so it'll be the warmest part of the day, at least. It's going to be on CBS. Ian Eagle and Charles Davis are going to get the call. So we're going to have a good announced crew for this game. We all know going into the game, Joe Burrow is near the top of the league. I think since some of the games have been played out, he may have been passed because they had a bye week. He may have been passed in terms of number one for yards, but he's top of the league in terms of like touchdown to interception ratio. Jamar Chase, Bengals wide receiver, leads the league in yards. I think he may have been passed in receptions by CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys after the Thanksgiving game again, but leads the NFL in touchdown receptions as well. Steelers, George Pickens, he had a big game against the Bengals last year, but he's got 776 yards on 52 receptions, but only 2 touchdowns for George Pickens. But the last time the Bengals and the Steelers played each other was last December 23rd. Steelers won that game 34-11. Embarrassment in Pittsburgh. That was when George Pickens was running past Chidobe Awuzie and Jordan Battle for multiple touchdowns, making them look ridiculous. So hopefully the Bengals are able to muster a better performance than they did. I think at that point Jake Browning was in the game, but they may have played, I think they played the Steelers with Joe Burrow before that, or may have been Jake Browning twice. But either way, Steelers embarrassed the Bengals twice last year. So the Bengals owe the Steelers this year, now that they've got Joe Burrow back. But Joe Burrow has had rough games against the Steelers. There was one game, maybe it was 2 seasons ago, where he got intercepted at least 3 or 4 times. Like one of his most interceptions in a game, there was the play where TJ Watt just like jumped up and intercepted the ball like out of nowhere. One of the most incredible interceptions you're ever going to see from a defensive lineman. So Steelers have had quite a record, especially Mike Tomlin's record against Zach Taylor. The Bengals have won a couple times against the Steelers, but it hasn't been usually in the Bengals' favor. But if we look at like overall statistics wise, I should have mentioned Bengals are somehow favored to win in this game. The Vegas odds makers have listed the Bengals at a 2.5 to 3 point favorite. So they're at home, so I guess they'd say it's 50-50, but you give the home team a few extra points in their favor. So this game really is a coin flip either way, because Bengals, their record is 4-7, so that's obviously not great. But they're at home, back against the wall. They've got Joe Burrow, they've got Jamar Chase, they've got Trey Hendrickson. They've got elite players. So if you don't have any elite players on the team at all, then it's not a great chance for you to win. But as long as you've got those players, those jokers in your hand or whatever, like they could just go off at any moment and change the game on its head. So Bengals are always going to have a chance. They're never going to be completely out of it. But they've got to start winning some of these games, some of these close games that they've been losing. They're 1-6 in one-score games. And almost every game in the NFL comes down to one score, so that's not that big of a deal. Most of the time they've been losing, but there were some games where they were ahead by multiple scores. They were ahead by like 10 or 14 points, like against the Ravens. And the Ravens came all the way back, put it to overtime, and then Bengals ended up losing. So the Bengals have found new and creative ways to lose all of these games. It hasn't been a trend. The only trend you could say is that the Bengals have beat the really bad teams and they lost to the good to pretty good teams. So they're right in the middle of the pack, the Bengals are, in terms of they're not terrible, they're not very good. That's where people, for some reason, you see like people have this sentiment, I guess, on social media of when are we going to admit that this is a bad team? When are we just going to say that this team is bad? Like we don't need to admit anything, and we don't need to say that this is a bad team just because they haven't won every single game. They're not necessarily bad. Like the Raiders, another example of a bad coaching and playing scenario. Yesterday in the game, the Chiefs-Raiders game, as a Bengals fan, I want the Chiefs to lose every game, and it's so frustrating that they're winning all these games in all these ridiculous manners. But yesterday, Raiders had an opportunity to, I think, win the game because the Chiefs were ahead by 2 points. I guess I could just look it up on the scoreboard here. But Raiders had the ball. They drive it all the way down. No timeouts. Raiders lost by 2 points. Raiders had the ball. It was like, I forget what it was, not that many seconds left, and like 15 seconds left. All of a sudden, the quarterback's not looking. Center snaps the ball. It bounces off the quarterback who isn't looking. It gets fumbled, kicked around a few times, and the Chiefs end up recovering the ball, and they can just take a knee and win the game. That's kind of embarrassing mistakes that the Bengals have not made. I mean, maybe you could say like kind of the hold against the Chiefs against the Ravens where they kind of messed up the hold a little bit. It was led to an inaccurate field goal try. But that wasn't really like totally embarrassing. This was the Raiders and the Bears. Those are the kind of things that really break a team's confidence in the coach and what they're doing. So I haven't seen that yet. And there's been the Bengals have just gotten fair and square beat. They haven't done anything totally reckless or incompetent that would make fans or players be totally out on the team or the coaching staff. And hopefully that continues. That's what I'm always rooting for in these games is competitive, competent football from the Bengals. So that's all I really want. I don't want anybody to get injured because we've seen too many injuries lately. DJ Turner, cornerback, is going to be out for the rest of the season with that broken collarbone. That's going to mean Josh Newton, 6th-round rookie who's played maybe 50 snaps for the entire year, is now going to be starting at cornerback opposite Cam Taylor-Britt. And there's been a lot of, negative press around Cam Taylor-Britt, most of it deserved. But we got to remember that maybe Cam Taylor-Britt was, looking better last season because the defensive around him was better, just in terms of up front when they had DJ Reader causing disruption. And, who knows? Maybe the safety play isn't really where it needs to be this year, so he's not getting the help he needs from safety. So I don't know, but whatever it is, Cam Taylor-Britt isn't playing very well this season, and he's not setting himself up for a contract extension, which, again, maybe that was in his head. Maybe he got ahead of himself thinking about the contract extension he was going to get in the offseason and kind of put the cart before the horse. And it's like, oh, wait, actually, I took for granted the fact that I actually need to go out there and play. He had that one interception against the Chiefs, that one good play, and then ever since then he hasn't done anything. He got benched twice, including against the Chargers. The only reason they put Cam Taylor-Britt back on the field was because DJ Turner got hurt. So they didn't have anybody else. They're like, oh shit, Cam Taylor-Britt, get back in there. So it's going to be interesting to see how does he respond to this adversity. We haven't seen him. He didn't give any interviews to the media. He didn't want to answer any questions. So it doesn't really matter what you say to the media. Any of these players, just go out there and play. Same thing for Evan McPherson. Evan McPherson, the kicker, he talked to the media and they asked him, what was up? Why are you missing so much, basically? And he was like, oh, I don't know. It was concerning because he said they hadn't figured it out yet. He was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm kicking it good in practice and in the pregame. It's just not transferring over to the game. It's weird, which is concerning because it's kind of, if he doesn't know and he's had the whole bye week to figure, because you want to say, what you want to hear is, oh yeah, I identified something that I can improve on, to work on, to correct, and now it's not going to happen anymore. But he's just kind of saying like, Yeah, I don't know. It's the damnedest thing. I'm just gonna keep kicking it the same way. So, I mean, hopefully the results are better than they have been. But it's kind of the Zach Taylor approach of like, I don't know. I feel like we're doing a good job. It's just we keep losing. So, I mean, as we all know, it's a results oriented business. So if Evan keeps missing, it doesn't matter how good of a guy he is, he's going to be out of here. He's going to be gone. We're going to find a new kicker sooner rather than later. Same thing applies to all these players except for Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is obviously not going anywhere. We all know that. But the rest of these guys better get their shit together, or they're not going to be playing here anymore. Or maybe they will. Who knows? Maybe the Bengals don't care. But I just, as a fan, you always want to see the team making strides to get better. And it feels like recently, I mean, I will have to remind myself because there's a narrative out there that the Bengals are cheap. And to a certain extent, yes, but you could also just say they're budget conscious because they are spending money. Like, it's not like they're not spending money. If they were truly cheap, they wouldn't pay any of their players much of anything. But to the contrary, the Bengals, in terms of active spending, like money that they're actually paying to players this year, they're number one in the league. No other team is paying their players more money than the Bengals are. It's just that the players that the Bengals chose to pay haven't played very well. They're just not that good. It's not like, they signed Geno Stone to a big contract and paying him lots of money. They signed Sheldon Rankins to a big contract, signed him lots of money. They signed Evan McPherson to that contract extension. He's getting lots of money. They're just playing like garbage. It's not like they're not paying players. It's just that they're not good. So maybe that was a decision in which players they decided to keep and which players they decided to get rid of. But the narrative that they're cheap just because they didn't sign Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to contract extensions at astronomical levels, they're just trying to allocate the money in different areas. And maybe you could say their allocation skills aren't good, but they are definitely spending the money. They're spending it. Trust me. They're just not getting returns on investment. They're just not good at investing it. That's the thing. They've got it. They're spending it. They're just not good at it. Same thing with these players, though. Like, it's not that they're bad. They're just not very good either. Except for, Jamar Chase. Obviously, he's good. He can basically outrun the entire defense if you just give him the ball. And again, that just brings up my question of why is Zach Taylor still the head coach? Because couldn't they get the same results with anybody else as the coach? What would be the difference? Like I said, they're not going to make a change because he's getting paid. So they don't want to make a change and still pay Zach Taylor to be at home. But it's just frustrating. I know. We wanted more out of the season. I wanted more. Hopefully the players wanted more. I don't know that they do, though, honestly. Like, some of these guys, they might be getting ready to wrap this season up. So hopefully we see a good effort against the Steelers. It's the Steelers week, divisional rival. I don't want to see Mike Tomlin blowing kisses walking out of Paycor Stadium as the Steelers lay another beatdown on the Bengals. It's been too much of that kind of little brother getting beat up by the bigger brother or getting beat up by the bully. Bengals, they need to defend home turf. Paycor Stadium has not been kind to the Bengals this season, so let's get win number 2 of the year at home. And maybe we can celebrate something next week, because losing is terrible, obviously. I wish, that ruined the bye week vibes too, because going into the bye week on a 2-game losing streak didn't feel good. So hopefully we can come back in the next episode and celebrate a Bengals win. So if you've listened this far, don't forget to subscribe, give me a rating, thumbs up, all that kind of stuff, so more people can find out about this show. But thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate it. And until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.